Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's Mental Health is Essential series. Tonight's topic is support for caregivers. And one thing I wanted to let you all know that this session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. We will stop recording at the Q&A portion of the talk. A few of the learning points I wanted to mention before we start. What you will come away with this presentation is understanding the complex challenges caregivers face, learn how to navigate a crisis for our loved ones and ourselves, learn from caregivers with lived experience, and recognize that self-acceptance is a journey. And tonight's presentation will be facilitated by Christine Somerville from NAMI, Cook County, North Suburban. And I'm going to pass it on to Christine.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you so much for having us. So hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. I'm Christine Somerville. I am the Director of Programs at NAMI, Cook County, North Suburban. And I am a mental health educator and also a mental health first aid instructor. I joined NAMI in 2016 after deciding to leave higher education so I could make a more impactful contribution to the field. And so I'm going to be moderating the discussion tonight. I won't be talking as much as our other two guests, but I'll be chiming in here and there. If you don't know NAMI, I just wanted to mention that it's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and there are 600 affiliates across the country. In Illinois, there are 20. And NAMI Cook County North Suburban is your affiliate here in Evanston. So in addition to serving Evanston, we also serve 16 other communities. And we're different than other mental health providers that are in your community in that our programs are free and mostly they are peer-led. So we don't employ clinicians. We employ individuals that have lived experience, expertise, and we certify them, we train them to teach and to run our support groups. So we help families and individuals through their life journey with their mental health challenges. And we really work as much with families as we do with individuals, offering support for those caregivers. The families are often left out of treatment plans and forgotten after a diagnosis is made, but they are as crucial to a person's recovery as the physician or the psychiatrist and the pharmaceutical interventions that are determined to be right for a client. So we are happy to share what we know about how hard it is to be a caregiver and what caregivers need to be able to support their loved ones. I've introduced myself, and Susan and Chris will introduce themselves in NAMI fashion, which means that they each will tell you what they want to share. They'll share as much as they want to share about themselves. And I am going to turn it over to have Susan start.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I am the proud mother of 4 sons, the youngest of who is 24 years old, who suffers from a severe mental illness. He has schizophrenia, bipolar, among many other things like OCD, anxiety, depression, and Tourette syndrome. I was introduced to NAMI by a doctor at the psychiatric ward at a local hospital where my son had often been a patient. NAMI has been a place for me to gain knowledge about the mental health challenges my son faces, gives me guidance on how to support and care for him, and also gives me the inspiration to help others through my volunteer work. I too am an educator for NAMI. I run the family to family program and also teach that program. On to you, Chris.
Oh, okay, great. I'm Chris Gillock. I'm a longtime Evanston resident. I live not far from St. Francis Hospital. Yeah, I came to NAMI like many people do. I was in a panic over a nightmare mental health crisis that hit 10 years ago, although it started a long time before that, and found in NAMI some education that I desperately needed, as well as support from people that were in the same boat as I was, basically. And ended up going to the family-to-family course. From there, decided, I think that we need to increase the number of family support groups out there. And I made that point in a family-to-family class, and they said, great, how would you like to become a facilitator? So as is often the case, if you make a suggestion, you get drafted to implement that suggestion. So I said, okay, well, I'll do that. I got trained, and I've been facilitating a Saturday morning family support group in Evanston. Gosh, it's been 10 years now, I guess, almost 10 years that I've been involved in that. And we meet weekly on Saturday mornings. And a few years back, I had the honor of joining the board of the Cook County North Suburban Chapter of NAMI. So I'm also on the board, and get to hang out with Christine a little bit, which is great, and the other wonderful staff people. My loved ones, I have a former spouse who has bipolar disorder. I have a 30, well, how old is she now? She'll be 30, she's 39, 38 or 39 year old daughter who has severe anxiety and depression, and also is a recovering alcoholic. One of my 30-year-old has bipolar disorder with psychotic features. And then I have a 26-year-old daughter who has major depression and several suicide attempts. Fortunately, none recently. So that's my crew. Oh, I also have a grandson who's on the autism spectrum and has ADHD. So we have a mix of people in my family that have various challenges. And so I'm delighted to be here with you and talk a little bit more about how to keep from going crazy yourself as you're trying to help these folks.
So Susan, do you want to start with sharing some of your
Sure.
expertise and experience and thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key things I'm really going to talk about today, I'm going to start with a metaphor, an airplane metaphor that we often use in our family-to-family classes. Then I'm going to talk about some of the things that can help caregivers as they are often, the overwhelmingly responsible for their loved ones. So being prepared for a potential crisis, and how we can, better take care of ourselves for that long-term journey that I think we're all gonna be in for a while. That being said, let's, if you want, we can make this a conversation. So if you have any questions, feel free to stop me along the way. I want to, as Christine and Chris mentioned, NAMI is a place that supports caregivers like myself. And because today's discussion is about supporting the caregiver, I think it may be a good time to reference the following airplane metaphor that we often use in our NAMI programs, and of which I have to frequently remind myself so that I have the strength to move forward and move ahead on some of those days when I have to take care of my son. So here's the metaphor. If you have ever been on an airplane, you may remember that the flight attendant talks about what to do in an emergency. They say that if oxygen masks become necessary, you should put your own mask on before helping others with theirs. If we don't have oxygen, we will pass out. If we are unconscious, we can't help another person. I think this is a great metaphor and an important thing to remember as a caregiver, and the importance of taking care of ourselves. As you probably know, families assume an overwhelming responsibility for the care of their loved ones who suffer from mental health challenges. The diagnosis of a mental illness for a loved one can be a very traumatic event, and there is little time to prepare for it. Most people have little previous experience with it and have few sources of guidance. It's a huge emotional impact on the family. As caregivers for someone with a mental illness, we often feel confined, uninformed, emotionally exhausted, and unable to find the necessary support. Additionally, because of the stigma, the negative stereotypes, and false beliefs about mental illness, many people have less compassion for those who suffer from it and their families affected by it. One of many things that I have learned through lived experience for caring for my son, and which is supported by NAMI, is that burnout is not just for professionals. Sometimes it feels like we are professional caregivers since we gain a lot of knowledge over time about systems, services, therapy, and medication. Being a caregiver can be stressful, and we may be overwhelmed or experience burnout. Caregiver burnout can show up in different ways and include emotional exhaustion like depression and boredom, physical exhaustion like headaches and body aches, emotional stress and hopelessness. It can cause us to be absent from work or even family activities, and we may increase in what we call escape activities like overeating, overdrinking, or smoking. And we may have lower self-esteem because we're blaming ourselves. As much as we love the family member who suffers from mental illness, the thought of possibly needing to care for someone forever carries a lot of emotional and financial stress and the potential for ongoing burnout. For our family, my husband and I have taken on the necessary regimen of navigating our son's medical treatment and care, scheduling his doctors, psychiatrist, psychologist appointments, and navigating the school system with him. It has also been important for us to put together a financial plan for our son, working through medical insurance situation when he turns 26 years old, thinking about and preparing for different housing scenarios when he has to live on his own, if he can live on his own. We're not sure of that yet. We're working with pharmacists who may be able to fill his pill boxes every week when or if he lives alone, so that he takes all the necessary pills so he can function. And involving our 3 other sons for what their expectations are going to be when my husband and I are no longer able to be caregivers. Caregiver burnout is a common occurrence, but there are ways where the burnout may be minimized. A key thing that NAMI suggests for families in the caregiving role is to be prepared for a potential mental health crisis. In being prepared, there can be less worry and stress associated with the crisis situation if it occurs. In a crisis or relapse situation, the best thing we can do is to remain calm and try to de-escalate the situation. If at all possible, it is important to be able to notice early warning signs of a potential relapse, such as paranoia, outburst, or sleeplessness. The goal during the crisis is to prevent things from getting worse and to provide empathetic support and protection to the person experiencing the crisis. In managing a crisis, if it does develop, is to consider how your loved one may be feeling. If you are alone, you may need to ask someone you trust to join you and help you manage the situation. If that's not possible, it is important to have a crisis file with information to help you prepare for emergencies. The crisis file can include things like emergency phone numbers and contacts, the police department, the crisis intervention team, your loved one's psychiatrist or psychologist. It's also good to have in that crisis file the national crisis hotlines and helplines. Ways to deal with the criminal justice system or navigating the legal system, ways to find a doctor and what to ask them during those situations. Ideas about how to manage violent and disruptive behaviors are always a good thing to have in your crisis file. additional information about warning signs of relapse or suicide. For me and my husband, we have also typed a list of all our son's medication, the doses, and what they are used for. This is always helpful if our son needs to be hospitalized at any time and to provide to the doctors. We have also communicated with our son, our other sons, all this information so that they are aware when they may be called on to be the first responders. You can find fact sheets and additional information about warning signs at the NAMI.org crisis guide, if you would like to have that. Additionally, as a caregiver, it is important to remember to take care of the caregiver. Caregiving is hard because we often see many changes in our loved one, and it can cause additional grief. You may be grieving the missed opportunities for your loved ones or how your own life has changed. This is a common emotion, and feeling better doesn't always mean difficult emotions go away. That being said, taking time to help yourself recharge and heal is an important aspect to maintaining a healthy and positive attitude, not only for yourself, but supporting your loved one's recovery. Some of the principles of living a balanced life that we talk about in our NAMI family to family class are as follows. 1, do as much as you can financially and physically to improve the situation, but don't feel guilty about what you aren't able to do. 2, strive for good physical health. You and other family members will benefit from a healthy diet and regular exercise. 3, watch your stress level. Try not to let yourself burn out. When you feel yourself getting anxious, slow down and take a deep breath. 4, an effort to maintain social contacts is critical. 5, you may want to seek out and join a support group. Comfort and knowledge are shared in these groups. You may want to consider going to a NAMI support group where you can talk openly with other family members. 6, continue pursuing your own interest. Ignoring your hopes and desires to focus solely on your loved one will only add to the challenges. And 7, do something for someone else. Ignoring your hopes, do something for somebody else. Our own problems seem less overwhelming when we are involved in giving support to others. Also remind yourself that you are a loving helper, not a magician. None of us can change anyone else. We can only change how we relate to others. It is important to focus on caring for ourselves, not only for ourselves, but because we will be in a better position to help others. Additional key things to remember in caring for yourself is to be gentle on yourself. Find a place where you can be alone every day or when you need it. Remember, because of the pain we see around us, we may feel helpless at times. Just by caring and being present, we're doing something important for our loved ones. And at the end of a day, focus on one good thing that happened. Accept support and reassurance from others, or form a buddy system of mutual support. Be sure to talk about more than just mental health topics when you're socializing. Above all else, learn to laugh and to play. Self-acceptance is a journey, and it is important to us to acknowledge our reality as it is in the present moment, and that we need to allow ourselves to be happy even though we are caring for others. And finally, it is important to mention that people with mental health conditions also sometimes feel guilty. They can feel that their condition makes it hard for the people who care about them to do things they like. They may feel like they are a burden on others. That's another reason it's so important to take care of ourselves. When a loved one sees you doing things you enjoy, it can help them feel better about themselves. You are working on your own well-being, which is a good example to set. Any questions before I turn it over to Chris? take it away.
Thank you, Susan.
Mhm.
Okay, that was great, Susan. Thanks so much. I'm going to talk a little bit about some more nuts and bolts stuff. The first thing I want to touch on is when you have a loved one that is in a mental health crisis, what the hell do you do? How do you navigate that situation? Second is a very common problem. I hear it all the time in the support group is you got a loved one who definitely has got a mental illness, may have a diagnosis, but is not interested in getting any treatment, resists it, or is too depressed to take action. Any number of things can prevent someone with a mental illness from getting the care that they need. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about housing alternatives, particularly when you get to the point where your loved one, either your loved one is an adult, you're a spouse or a parent or a sibling, or you're raising a kid and the kid ages out and now is, you know, a young adult as opposed to a minor. We can force certain things to happen when a loved one is under 18, and once they hit 18, of course, there has to be some collaboration somehow or another, and sometimes keeping them under the same roof as the rest of the family is not a viable option. So what do you do? Before I get into all that, I want to do one thing here, if you'll indulge me. There's a little essay that I picked up. Actually, I picked it up several years back when my oldest daughter, the one with anxiety and depression, who was an alcoholic, is an alcoholic. She finally went into rehab, and the folks at the rehab joint forced me to go to this meeting. It was an Al-Anon meeting, and maybe you've heard of Al-Anon. It's a 12-step program designed for the friends and family of alcoholics. And I thought this was very interesting, this essay, and it's something I share with my family support group on occasion, and it's something that seems to speak to a lot of people. So if you'll give me a moment, I'm just going to read it. It's called Helping. My role as helper is not to do things for the person I am trying to help, but to be things. Not trying to control and change his or her actions, but through understanding and awareness to change my reactions. I will change my negatives to positives, fear to faith, contempt for what he or she may do to respect for the potential within him or her, hostility to understanding, and manipulation or overprotectiveness to release with love, not trying to make him or her fit a standard or image, but giving them an opportunity to pursue their own destiny, regardless of what that choice may be. I will change my dominance to encouragement, panic to serenity, the inertia of despair to the energy of my own personal growth, and self-justification to self-understanding. Self-pity blocks effective action. The more I indulge in it, the more I feel the answer to my problems is a change in others and in society, not in myself. Thus, I become a hopeless case. Exhaustion is the result when I use my energy in mulling over the past with regret or trying to figure ways to escape a future that has yet to arrive. Projecting an image of the future and anxiously hovering over it for fear that it will or it won't come true uses all of my energy and leaves me unable to live today. Yet living today is the only way to have a life. I will have no thought for the future actions of others, neither expecting them to be better or worse as time goes on, for in such expectations, I am really trying to create. I will love and let be. All people are always changing. If I try to judge them, I do so only on what I think I know of them, failing to realize that there is much I do not know. I will give others credit for their attempts at progress and for having had many victories which are unknown to me. I too am always changing, and I can make that change a constructive one. If I am willing, I can change myself. Others I can only love. Okay, that's a long essay. I thank you for listening to it, but the message here boiled down is, hey, remember what you can control and what you can't. And Susan spoke to this as well. You cannot really control anybody else's behavior, actions, or their illnesses, obviously. You can only control your actions and reactions to what's going on and get more skilled at realizing that even if your loved one with a mental illness is not doing well, you don't have to be miserable as well. You can find a way to have a calm existence, even though your loved one is struggling. So that's my setup there. Now let's talk about navigating mental health crises with loved one. A mental health crisis runs the gamut. Okay, you can have somebody who's actively suicidal. I've experienced that with my youngest several times. You can have somebody who's in a psychotic episode. I've had that with my ex-wife and with my 30-year-old. You can have folks that have the type of mental illness that creates delusions, that causes them to feel aggressive towards you or others. And so the very, very first rule of navigating a mental health crisis with a loved one is safety first. Okay. Sounds too simple, but it is super important, and it's amazing how many people don't follow that rule. If somebody is borderline violent or looks like they're going to be violent, if they're throwing things, breaking things, if they're trashing their living space or your living space, or if they are threatening suicide, all bets are off. You got to get professionals in there to assist. And while it's scary and risky to do so, you may need to make that 911 call and bring law enforcement into the picture. In Evanston and many other communities around here, we do have folks that have been through crisis intervention training, and that's very helpful. When you make that 911 call, you can certainly make it clear when you're on the phone that you have an individual that's in a mental health crisis, and all the people that are coming on the scene should be aware of that and behave accordingly. And of course, it's always better not to have a 911 call as your go-to, but it's sometimes necessary. In the case of someone with suicidal ideation who is, actively talking about ending their lives, if possible, see if you can convince them to get to an emergency room. If not, if that's not possible, then the 911 option comes forward. Now, in my lived experience, I've done things the wrong way, and I've done things a little bit better. With my, I've been giving care to mentally ill people since 1990, although I wasn't aware that I was doing that for many years, because my wife was denying the fact that she had a mental illness. She was claiming that there were other things going on, usually things that related to my behavior that was triggering her. So I tried to navigate the crises by appeasing my loved one and walking on eggshells and trying not to create any situation that would lead to an outburst of rage and destructiveness. That is not the right way to navigate a mental health crisis. You don't want to create a problem, but neither do you want to try to prevent a crisis if one has to occur. Many times these breaking points are what get people into treatment, the treatment that they've been needing for years. More recently, with my 30-year-old who has had a number of issues, I've been able to assist her by contacting friends of hers to do wellness checks as opposed to sending police officers over to do it. Friends, and she has a cousin who she's fond of, and the cousin can check in on her just to make sure, okay, she goes radio silent, won't answer the phone, won't answer text messages. I just want to make sure that she's, not in a terrible situation, and I can get a check through a friendly source as opposed to strangers in uniforms. So that's a much better way to navigate that sort of a crisis. But by and large, I think the main thing to remember is the safety, your own safety is paramount. And also, if someone is actively suicidal or is behaving in a way that's creating a danger to themselves, that has to be dealt with, and we can't be too gentle about it. If you have to bring in a law enforcement, so be it. Next topic, dealing with loved ones that are resistant to treatment. This is a real conundrum. And I want everybody to take a pencil and write down the name of a book that I recommend to all my support group members that face this problems. It's called I'm Not Sick and I Don't Need Help. It's by Xavier Amador. It's a book worth reading. It's been around a while. Xavier Amador has a doctorate in psychology, but he also had a brother who he is very close to who's schizophrenic. And he went through the whole routine of saying, you got to take your meds. It's very important. And, you can't function unless you take them. And the problem, of course, with these medications is they have a lot of effects on people that they don't find to be pleasant, ranging from weight gain, a feeling of just being, dulled and like the personality has changed. You can get, all sorts of different things can happen with these medications for people. It affects libido. It affects all sorts of different things. So when they say I don't want to take the pills, it's not because they're just being obstreperous. It's because the pills don't just work on their mental health issues. They cause all sorts of other issues too. So it's not crazy. I concluded finally that, hey, I cannot tell somebody that they need to take medications. I can suggest that tool is worthwhile and they should explore it. But if they refuse, I can't do much about that. Same with psychologists and psychiatrists. We have a highly fragmented mental health system that's it ranges from mediocre to awful, right? And if you are a regular consumer of mental health services, you're going to have some stories of terrible product that you're receiving from somebody. I personally have run into psychiatrists that are just pill pushers, and you can have, finding a therapist that a therapeutic relationship is a challenging thing to find and nurture. And chemistry is important, and also the time available for the therapist and their willingness to deal with challenging mental health people. A lot of therapists prefer to have a clientele that consists of just worried, well people who have minor issues. So it's very difficult to convince people to get into treatment if they don't want to. Once they have made the decision that, okay, something needs to happen, then you're kind of out of the woods. That doesn't mean that things get easy, but at least there's a path now, and you can be more helpful. You can assist in making appointments. You can help them find the support that they need. You can serve as their case manager if you're up for that. But until they say, okay, yes, I am definitely in need of assistance, it's more important to provide them with a listening ear, to let them know that the door is open, that you have some resources that you can offer if they want to take advantage of those resources. But, the door might be open. You can't go through that door, grab them and drag them in. That leads to tears for everybody. So that's a challenging situation and frustrating, but that's the way it is, at least in my experience. Finally, housing alternatives. It is really tough to find things like group homes. The places that are decent have long waiting lists. Many of the group homes are private, and so you have to pay out of pocket for those things, and it's not cheap. Here in Illinois, we have these facilities that are called, the acronym is SMRFs, and I think it stands for Special Mental Health Rehab Facility. And those are all, most of those people take Medicaid patients, which is great, but Medicaid doesn't pay that much, and many of those places are not exactly what you call fancy. There's a few of them that are quite good. Many of them are pretty basic. So you got, and some of them have dicey reputations. Some of them don't. Some of them are great. But so you have that option in Illinois. But let's assume for a minute, okay, that's not working. So you got let's say you have an adult with a mental illness, sibling, spouse, adult child. What are your options? Well, they can live with you, right? If they're in treatment and stable, that might work well if you have a housing situation that'll accommodate them. The challenge with that, of course, is many people that need the housing are neither stable or they don't have family members that have the space to accommodate them. Now, I have a couple of situations that I'm navigating now with my two adult daughters, both of whom have serious mental illnesses. What happened is when I finished up my divorce from my bipolar spouse, I realized, okay, I was looking after the two they were teenagers at the time, teenage kids with the mental illnesses. And I said, okay, well, I can't live in the same single family home with them. That's too crazy for me. So what I did is I was fortunate enough to be in a situation where I could find and acquire a 2-flat, right? Two apartments stacked on top of each other. Here in Evanston, you see those brick buildings all over the place, built in the 20s and 30s. I bought one of those things, and then I did a rehab job and put additional living space in the basement. And so my 26-year-old lives right underneath me in this place, and my 30-year-old has space in the basement. They have all opted for a different living situation, which I'll talk about in a minute. So what does that do? Well, I have my kid downstairs. I can interact with her regularly and keep tabs on how she's doing. She's doing really well, by the way, over the past couple of years. But I'm not, it's more, we have more of a hybrid relationship. We're neighbors, and then of course I'm her dad. My 30-year-old just fell in love and moved to Davenport, Iowa, fell in love with another mentally ill person, and they've kind of set up their own little 2-person group home in Davenport. And that seems to be, it's stable anyway. And so they're working that out. And Andy has got some issues, big ones, frankly. And I worry about Andy because worry is something we do. It's kind of like, worrying is like rocking in a rocking chair. It gives me something to do, but I don't get anywhere. But anyhow, I do feel concerned for her. So what I've done there, instead of, initially I wanted Andy to come back and live in this building with us. They didn't want to do that. So I had to let go of that. But what I do is I go out to Davenport once a month to do a wellness check myself, see how Andy's doing, see if I can assist Andy in getting some appointments. And basically, be a encouraging, friendly presence as they struggle, and they are struggling with being a 30-year-old a bipolar person in Davenport, Iowa. So those are the kind of the way things played out in my experience. There's many other stories out there, both in terms of dealing with treatment-resistant loved ones. There's certain ways of getting a treatment-resistant person. You can get the court to order them into treatment. That's happened. That actually happened with my wife. She got it. She committed some crimes, and then instead of I was the complainant, and the prosecutors asked me, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And I said, I would like the court to order her into treatment. And so that's what the court did, and she's been much better since that happened. So I think I've talked long enough, and I've talked kind of in a disjointed, blathering way. So I'm going to stop and let people ask questions, or you can either do it out loud or drop them into the chat, whatever you care to do.
Thank
Before
you,
we,
Chris. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to read the comment after Susan ended her presentation from Loretta. She complimented her presentation, and to let those who have mental health issues see you continue to attempt to move forward while helping them.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of comment also that both Susan and Chris bring to this discussion a level of expertise that you can't really find in the regular traditional way of continuum of care. You're not going to hear, how to live your life, how to manage these small, not so small, but some things are small, daily things from your physician, or the psychiatrist won't tell you what to do often in crisis situations. So both Chris and Susan have been there, and they are now playing a role for NAMI where they support other caregivers. And because they've been there, they have that nuanced understanding of how difficult it is, and how many choices one has to make in any given situation. So I want to thank both Chris and Susan. And I think this, it would be great if anyone has some questions and comments, and if we can just have a conversation now. For the time remaining, there's not a lot of time, but we would love to chat.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself if you have a question, or type it in the chat box. Any comments, feedback?
While people are pondering or maybe typing, I'll just reference our kind of the goals that we had for tonight. And one was sort of to show or demonstrate the complexity that caregivers are facing. And maybe some of you have already been through that yourselves. So that was information that you might have a lot of. And then also navigating the crisis for a loved one and ourselves. And recognizing that self-acceptance is a journey. So those were sort of the main topics that we wanted to engage with you on tonight. So let us know your thoughts if you have any thoughts or questions or comments. Our support group that Chris runs, it's one of actually 4 other support groups for families, and it meets weekly. And so there are a lot of folks out there that that get together, not just with Chris, but with some of our other facilitators to share stories, to share resources, to strategize with one another, and to support one another. So our support groups really are for caregivers, supporting caregivers. And I think the same is true for the class that Susan teaches too. She's there to help others navigate through their understanding of what they're facing and what their loved one is facing. So that's the kind of support we do on an educational level.
Yeah, I'd just like to interject. I think for me, the support groups have been critically important. And one of the good things about being a facilitator, I have to show up at the support groups, and I need to show up at the support groups, even though I don't have anybody in active crisis right now. What I can tell you though is there is something really healing about being in a group of people that are in similar circumstances and have similar lived experiences. You can't really find it elsewhere. These groups are confidential. We have guidelines regarding what can be discussed and what can't. You know, we don't allow, well, it's not so much we don't allow it, we discourage, I should say, discussions about religion, politics, anything that doesn't have anything to do with the topic at hand, which is how do we live our best life when we have loved ones with mental illnesses. And there's a lot of valuable shared experiences that people relate and specific information about how to do something like, okay, how do you get a loved one into a group home? There's people in the group that show up and in the process of doing it. We get to hear week by week how it's going. How do you deal with somebody who is seriously mentally ill and refuses to do anything about it? How do you allow people to hit bottom sometimes? And bottom is really a deep bottom for some of these people. They end up on the street, right? You see them on the street all the time. Folks that can't quite interact with their family members or with the mental health care system, and they end up homeless, right? Lots of that going on. So, and how do you deal with it? What do you do when one of your loved ones has decided that they're going to live on the street rather than accept treatment? Those are real life issues that come up in these groups, and we provide each other with support and we learn from each other.
Mark commented in the chat box, I am very impressed and touched by the presenter's knowledge, skill, and devotion to supporting their families. Anyone else?
I'd just like to say that I didn't know this was a NAMI kind of presentation. I attend NAMI family support groups, usually Wednesday nights here. I'm in the northwest suburbs. Chris, I was born at St. Francis and I went to St. Scholastica High School, which is no longer there. And yeah, if anyone on here has never done a NAMI support group, I recommend them highly. You don't have to be on camera. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to say anything. And I don't like to say this, but I'm going to say it. I think my life's hard with my adult daughter. And sometimes I get off that call and say, I've got it easy. And I'm just being honest. It's not easy, but man, some people have bigger issues, bigger fish to fry than I do. And it's just a safe place to come together and talk to people. Family want to help us, but if they haven't experienced it, they don't quite understand what we're going through. I've never dealt with mental health issues until my daughter, and it hasn't been easy. And I have a whole different regard for homeless people now that I never used to have. So yeah, big proponent of NAMI. I recommend it to anybody to join one of their support groups. I've been doing it all virtual. I was trying to find an in-person one out here, and they still say they're all still virtual. So this has been a blessing the last 2 years to have at least virtual, if nothing else. So thank you guys for doing what you do. It's not easy, but you give back, right? NAMI's been great to me, and maybe someday I'll be able to give back to NAMI like you guys are doing.
Well, it's one of those things, I get more out of it than I give, for sure. And I just feel lucky that I found the place, found NAMI, and boy, it's a real accepting organization. I'll tell you that. And the need is huge. We always can use, willing hands to help with the process that we're going through. We're looking for facilitators now for our support groups, as a matter of fact, so we can expand them and also give some of the people who have been doing it for a long time a chance to step back a little bit. So yeah, it's a great organization. There's many other great organizations out there as well, I know, but this is the one that I've spent the most time with and feel the best about.
Anyone else before we close? Okay, just to remind you that tonight's presentation has been recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. And I want to thank our presenters for me personally sharing your personal stories. They were very, very touching. And I related as well, dealing with mental illness and some members of my family as well. So I appreciate the presenters this evening. If there are no other questions, thank you all for attending. Thank
you for
you.
having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
You will.
Appreciate
Bye.
it.
Take care of yourselves.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.